Okay. Okay.
Okay, I've got 5:31. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting of council committee meetings together. I will say that Mayor Savine indicated late this afternoon that something had come up that demanded his undivided attention. He sends his regrets for not being able to be here tonight. We've got 4 committees to meet tonight, and the first one on the agenda is nominations. So, Mr. Cook, take it away.
Thank you very much. Just a second here. Let me pull it up. We have 2 positions at the library that we are to come up with nominees for. And those will I can't get it to come up. Believe it or not.
You want me to help you, Gerald?
Thank you. I appreciate your technical ability. I really do.
Why did that get away from everybody in the room?
We have 4 applications for those 2 positions. Katie Barton, Julia Brockelman, Kate McKinney, and Tynell Slappy. The applications were sent out to everybody on the on our committee, and let's take for the first position. Those are all 2-year positions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Kate Barton. Any questions with regard to Kate Barton? Be considered. She's been on Friends of the Library. She's volunteered on Meals on Wheels, PTO member, Historical House Museum, Presbyterian Church, substitute teacher. She familiar with it. Master's in Labor Relations, Human Resources, and News and Journalism. Bachelor of Science degree and a master's. She lives in the community. Her first choice is Library Advisory Board. Okay, that's Kate Barton. Julie Brockelman. Lives in the community, is registered to vote here, as you can see. High school graduate. She was director of her local church's children's ministry for a couple of years. Worked with kids in churches for the better part of 10 years. Held volunteer offices in 4-H and in a church setting. She's not been on any advisory board. She says she is an active consumer of the library, vote in local elections, and attend online council meetings when possible. Okay. Kate McKinney. Lists her address as Hyco, but that's because I think she and her husband live in Duffo, and he is the pastor of the Duffo Baptist Church. She is a new applicant. She is registered to vote in Stephenville. She moved to Erath County in 2018. She said in her statement that she was very grateful for our library services. She homeschools her 7 children and uses the library sources on a weekly basis for their education. And she said serving on the Library Advisory Board would be a privilege and a responsibility she wouldn't take lightly. Bachelor's degree in early childhood education, and she taught elementary school for a couple of years. And so that's Kate McKinney. The 4th application was from Tynell Slappy. She's also a new applicant. She is not employed. She is, I think we interviewed her husband last year. If you remember him, he works at Schreiber Foods and everything. So they live just right right in the edge of town, I believe. She attended Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. She's worked as an advocate for individuals with disabilities. She's an active member of the public library, and her statement, her reason for applying, she said, "I believe that I would be a valuable asset in helping to assist with the growth and development of the library via community outreach, adding new programs and redevelopment of existing programs." Okay, and so those are the four that we have to choose from. What are the any questions from the committee?
We have 2 vacancies,
We have 2 vacancies.
and both of those are for full term.
Those are for both full term. Okay?
And I guess there's no residential living requirement for this?
To my knowledge, there is not. Stacy, isn't that not correct?
I believe that's correct.
There's no residency requirement, so they can live outside the city or inside the city. Little different than on some of our boards, advisory boards and commissions that do have a residency requirement or will have one as soon as the population of this community goes over 20,000. Looking at these, it looks like the, well, any other questions? Ricky, Justin, Alan? It looks like the Kate Barton, the first one, and I don't know any of these people. I don't think I've ever met any of them, as a matter of fact. But from looking at the resume and the application, it looked like Kate Barton is probably, education-wise, has the highest level of education attained and has the most connectivity with the library right now as a Friends of the Library and all that kind of stuff. Tynell Slappy at the end is new to the community, totally. So is Julia Brockelman. So both of them have been here less than 2 years or thereabouts. Kate McKinney lives out of town. She is degreed, uses the library quite a bit too. So
Mr.
Any
Chair, do we need to
suggestion?
do these individually by place?
I don't know, do we need to do them by place?
It's up to y'all, but since they're both to your.
What places are they, then are we looking at? Place,
7,
place what?
3, and 7.
Place 3 and place 7.
I would make the motion to appoint Kate Barton to place number 3.
Okay?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Kate Barton to place number 3, to recommend that to the council. Any further questions? All in favor of Kate Barton for place number 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Then for place number 7,
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to appoint Tynell Slappy to place 7.
Second.
we have a motion to appoint Tynell Slappy to place number 7. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'll just say that it's good to see new community, people that are new to the community coming in and getting active, and I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't do well. I think all of the applicants will do just fine, but Ms. Slappy being new in the community, and her husband also has been here to try to get active in our community, I think it's a great opportunity to welcome them in.
I agree with you. I think it'd be good. All in favor of Tynell Slappy for place number 7 on the library board, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. I understand too that we have one vacancy on the Senior Citizens Board. We won't be taking that up this evening. We don't have an applicant for that, but one of our members on the Senior Citizens Board has passed away. And so that's leaving one vacancy there. Okay?
Do you know if either one of these others, Julia and Kate McKinney, are, had that as a second choice perhaps? or-
They did not.
They didn't think, they
Okay.
were all just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't make that tonight, but it would be a point to begin anyway.
And I think they're a good bit younger.
Well.
Of course, that's not a requirement. All you have to do is be over 55, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
So, okay. With that, we will call our nominating committee meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Next up on the agenda tonight is Parks and Leisure Services Committee. So, Mr. Robinson, the floor is yours.
We have one item of business to discuss tonight. Recently, we had a fire. The maintenance shop was damaged. We voted to move it. And I guess once construction began, there was some concern from the community as it relates to the location of it. Sir, Mr. King, is there anything you want to add to that?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Marshall. Yeah, it was me.
Okay.
No, sir, the reason it was placed where it is the majority of the park is a floodway. It's, you cannot build in a floodway. The rest of the park, or almost all of the rest of the park is either 100 or 500-year floodplains, and it was placed just outside of the 500-year floodplain. It's approximately 250 feet from the south entrance of the park. We've looked and found a couple of options, actually, I guess 3 options. One is to leave the building where it is. It was my understanding that one of the primary concerns about the building being there was that there's a fenced equipment yard plan, and that there was some concern about having the fenced and equipment and stuff as you come into the park. That can be eliminated, and all the large equipment could continue to be stored out at the MSC. That's where it's stored now. The park's maintenance equipment would be stored in that building, or the park maintenance items would be left in that building. The second option is to move the building to the west of Splashville and allow the equipment yard to be built. Just west of Splashville is an area. It's not a huge area, but it's certainly sufficient to put the building in a yard in. To the west of Splashville, the pad would only have to be built approximately a foot, maybe 2, to get it out of the floodplain. And we could either build the fence there or not build the fence there. There would be added cost to the building, which would be about $40,000. And so our recommendation is either option A, leave the building where it is, eliminate the fence, or option B, move the building to the west of Splashville and add additional money to that.
You mentioned there was concern over the fence. What specifically was the concern? Is it aesthetics? Is it security?
I think it was primarily aesthetics. I think, Ricky, what
Yeah,
you-
I'll be glad. I took a few calls on that. I think it was mostly aesthetics and being able to see the equipment and things. 2 elevated roadways there, both the Loop and Graham Street. So even with some kind of a screening, still seeing everything sitting down there in that fence. Barricades and maybe brush temporarily stored, whatever,
Gotcha.
similar to what we have now.
Sure. What, does this do anything to operations if we keep some stuff at MSC?
Not significantly, no, sir. As a matter of fact, that was an alternative suggested by Rick Price, the Parks Maintenance Superintendent.
He actually suggested
Yes, sir.
using the MSC.
Yes, sir. As a trade-off, the fence is about $11,000, and that's about what it would cost to finish out the inside of the building. So
I see.
the price would remain the same, but yes, sir.
Any questions from the committee?
I struggle, I know how expensive it is when you have work being done at one location and equipment stored at a different location that has to be moved back and forth, sometimes on a daily basis. It's inefficient because it's hard on most equipment to load it, or you take a pickup and trailer and load it, which is dangerous. It's also time consuming. Is the majority of the equipment that the park uses not in the park currently?
That's correct. My understanding, that's correct.
That is correct.
Is it because of a lack of space or lack of secure space or
Yes, sir. Both.
both?
Yes.
I guess Mr. Chair, I have a problem with spending extra money on a long-term basis on something that, to me, would logically be better there where the product and equipment is gonna be used. Aesthetics is important, and I understand that, but the citizens' resources are important, and when you pay employees to travel back and forth, that costs money, and I know that we will get calls about that too.
Understandably so, but A, that's what they're doing now, and B, when they have to maintain J.C. Park, they travel with the equipment anyway. I mean, we're not gonna have facilities at both of the major parks in town.
Right.
So there is gonna be some degree, whether there's a fenced-in yard there or not, there's gonna be some degree of travel across town.
What would be the equipment that's outside in the fenced yard?
Pickup trucks, trailers, potentially a tractor, mowers, like pull-behind mowers, the brush hogs, that kind of stuff.
But under options A and C, some equipment will still be left on site. It's just the larger stuff that you're suggesting moves to the MSC. So not everything.
Would remain at the MSC, that's where it is now.
Good point, okay.
Because the building can look nice, and I agree, it's, whatever we do is gonna look better than what we have now, which is a disaster. But if there's bigger stuff, my problem with this, we started this already, and so you poured a path.
Right.
And it probably should have been thought about a lot better beforehand, if this was the case. But I do agree that at the front of our entrance, I don't want it to ever look like what it currently looks like now. And if that's the standard, and I know that's not what it's gonna look like, but if that's what the fenced area is gonna eventually look like, let's don't even do that up front from the get-go, is kind of where I'm leaning. But I don't think you rip the pad up and move it, because what do we have spent already?
22.5.
Well, picking up and moving it doesn't alleviate the aesthetic concern, does it? You just move it from one spot to another.
Not as much. I
I
mean,
It would
Big portion
impact
of the
it.
entrance
partially
of the park.
hidden,
I see.
but it
It's not
wouldn't be
the
your
entrance
main
of the
road.
park.
Wouldn't be your main entry, one of your main entryways into the park,
And the main entryway to Splashville.
and the main
Correct.
entryway to Splashville.
So, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So what's the proposed facade of this building as of today?
It's proposed to be a metal building that will match the color of Splashville with a green roof like Splashville. So it will be aesthetically, color-wise, the same as Splashville.
But just a metal building, no rock, no brick, no,
That's correct. We are proposing landscaping around it.
If it were to be moved to the west of Splashville, does that impact any future growth at the Splashville complex? I know that's hard to answer, but.
It is very difficult to answer. If we were looking at expanding Splashville today, I would recommend that we go to the east because it is out of the floodplain. So I don't think so, but there's a possibility that it could. Again, I don't think that it would.
What is the, or is there a proposed location for the multi-use facility that we've discussed?
The most recent and most frequently discussed combined use, location of the combined use facility is on the hill where the current parks maintenance buildings are, right across the entryway from the rec center.
Okay. So the location of this won't impact that either way? If
No,
that's the
sir.
location we choose?
No, sir, it would actually improve the location. I mean, make it more viable because those buildings would not be there.
Well, we're gonna relocate it,
Yes, sir.
so, but A or B isn't. of
Has
the-
no impact on
Has
that.
no impact on
That's
that?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Is there a way to camouflage the equipment inside a chain link fence that would be acceptable for aesthetics? And I understand it's at the entrance and that may not have been thought through as well as we should have in the beginning, as Brandon said. Is there a way to camouflage that with a fence that will still provide security?
I thought the fence had the tape in it or what have you, that it's not just an open chain link fence.
They plan to cover it with windscreen.
Is that what it is?
Yes, sir.
And windscreen, is it, can you see through it?
Kind of.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
And with all due respect, our thought process was to keep it out of the floodplain.
Right. And that was the primary thought at the beginning.
Yes, sir.
No idea conceptually where you're talking. Here. Right. Where's the-
Any other questions?
Can I ask a
Comments?
question?
Of course.
As far as the other locations the equipment has to go, there's J.C. Park, cemeteries, airport,
Museum.
Median,
medians, museum.
J.C. Park.
So
I
really,
don't-
there's still,
There's still a lot of locations.
I don't know, 70% of the work is not done in that park anyway. Other than ball fields, but that equipment
I'll
will
say a
stay.
significant amount
A
of that
significant
park.
But the ball field equipment would be able to
But
be
that will
stored
stay.
there.
That's correct.
Then that, can I make a motion
Yes, sir.
to option A? That we leave the building where it is, eliminate the fenced yard. Park workers would store the equipment to maintain the parks and building at large equipment at the MSC.
And makes a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Recommendation passes, and that completes my report, sir.
Hey, Commissioner Robinson, next item on the agenda is for the Public Works Committee. Mr. Nix, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We have 3 items on our agenda tonight for, these are basically updates and informational reports that staff feels like we as a council and we as a committee need to hear. I'm going to let Mr. Williams address these, but keep in mind that the CDBG grants have been successful for us in the past in a number of different areas, and that's why we're considering some of these. The Harbin Drive improvements are something that we've talked about for several years, and the funding is now available to do this, and we have representatives here that are going to help us understand Freeze and Nichols' thinking tonight, and we have the 90% plans, I believe, in hand for their recommendations for this. And I'm going to let Mr. Williams take these and do the explanations, because I'm sure he'll be more thorough and more brief than I would be.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. The first item is one of 2 CDBG applications, and that, as a reminder, is the Community Development Block Grant. We have been successful with some of these in the past. This first one is the Main Street Revitalization Grant. And this is a new one that we're eligible for because of our new designation as a Main Street area. It has a little bit different characteristics than the CDBG grant that we normally get, which is dependent upon low to moderate income. That is not the case with the Main Street area. We do need to designate a Main Street area, and the last page of this first memo is an example of that area. It shows the historic downtown district in Stephenville. And what we would recommend at the staff level is to adopt a Main Street area that matches this historic downtown district, with the exception of the residential areas, because we can't have residential areas in a Main Street area per the TDA. That way, we could identify project areas within this district to maybe offset some of the downtown work that we've been discussing, perhaps get 1 or 2 blocks of Belknap. But this would give us the opportunity to look at this particular area and develop a project that fits within that $350,000 maximum grant amount that we would qualify for. There is a matching percent for this grant. It is 15%. So in order to have the most competitive application, we would want to go after the $350,000 with a 15% match, and that would cost exactly $52,500. The types of projects that are available in this Main Street area, and I left the words out, water and sewer, but water and sewer are eligible. So basically everything we've talked about in the downtown area. So water, sewer, streets, drainage, and then also lighting, sidewalks, ADA. So we have a whole plethora of things that we can choose from for a project in the downtown area. I'd like to let Mr. McAdams, Jake McAdams with Public Management, speak a little bit about this grant for us, because he's well more versed than I am also.
I appreciate it, Nick. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back with you. We can go into more specifics if you want. One additional point going off of what Nick said, though, is that there are additional points if the city does sidewalk and ADA access improvements within this area. Really, to be most competitive this year, it is strongly recommended that the city consider a sidewalk and ADA improvement project, as well as providing the 15% match to them. There will be future actions before council, both at your February and then maybe your March or your April meeting, after we were able to work with staff to scope a project. And so I believe tonight the main thing Nick was hoping to take away was some direction as far as what project type or area to focus on.
And we can, again, if you'd like for us to come back and suggest some projects, just know that that list is wide open. The water, sewer, the lighting, all of those things that we talked about downtown. So if that is something you want us to pursue, then we certainly will, or if there are other areas. But to recap what Mr. McAdams said, we will need to pass a resolution that identifies our Main Street area, and we can do that at a future meeting. Any questions about this particular grant?
Go ahead.
So a couple of things, Nick. Engineering spending is doable under this grant, or no? Is that additional cost?
It is covered with the cost of the grant, and I'm looking to make sure he's nodding his head yes. The grant pays for, the same way that the grant pays for Mr. McAdams, it also pays for our engineering. We sent out those requests for qualifications, and those are due on January 28th.
So we're talking about a grant dollar amount, and we're talking about a local match dollar amount. And so a total combined project cost, a little over $400,000. That is expected to include construction, engineering, and then administration fee. Now, exactly how it's broken out will kind of be ironed out as we scope out the project, but it would all be part of that total project budget.
All right,
Yes, sir.
thank you, sir. And then Nick, second question, can you identify on this map that you've given us what the residential carve-out would be on this? Is it just the ones on Washington there, East Washington? Or is there something else?
There, so the block of Floral, just north of
Yep.
Tarleton.
Yep.
So we would scratch that rectangle
Yep.
out of the project area. And then, can you remind me where that other one was, Jake?
Uh,
Is it the church property?
yeah, we would evaluate, that annex property there on the southwest corner of, College and Washington. I need to review the, program guidance about that. But those are the only two areas that we would consider removing from this. That area on East Washington is actually all commercial, all the way to, Divine Street. Yes, sir.
So just those two little?
That's it, yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Nick,
Yes, sir.
I noticed just yesterday, I guess it was, that the block of between Columbia, Belknap, McNeil, and Long Street, there's a big old historic house sitting there
Yes, sir.
that's falling in, kind of. And but I noticed that next door, the house that was purchased has now got a commercial sign up in front of it that it's going to be a new business. And also the house behind that big house, historic house, is now a mortgage finance office. So those are two businesses there. And that is the one block that is between the historic downtown and the Main Street designation area and City Park, is it not?
Appears to be, yes,
Does
sir.
that connectivity, is that important in this particular thing? It is not? Okay.
It's only, so this program is specifically intended to provide pedestrian access to businesses
Okay.
within the historic Main Street area. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I have a question, and I'm not sure how to ask this even, but if we apply for a grant, can we use the grant to do a part of the project, for example, sidewalks and ADA compliance and storm drainage, and use city dollars in addition to that to complete that area if the grant money is not sufficient? Because I know $350,000 is a significant amount of money, but when you enter into one of these projects, sometimes that won't do the entire project. Can we mix and do a part of the project with the grant
We
funds?
can combine funds.
Yeah, and so basically, what you're describing is a larger project than what the grant would afford.
Yeah.
The city of Stephenville does have a history of using these dollars as partial leverage to complete a larger project. There's various reasons that it's advisable to not do that. And so in general, yes, sir, that would be allowed, absolutely. We could either submit it all together as part of this big comprehensive thing, or locally, the city may internally plan, hey, we're gonna phase this project, we're gonna use grant funds to do this phase one, and then we're going to use local dollars to do this phase two. And yes, you can do that. There's a variety of ways to accomplish that.
Is that detrimental to the process or to the application evaluation?
It depends. It depends on what you want to do. Yes, sir. It is not detrimental to the application. You get no additional points or negative points within certain general parameters, either way. But it could complicate the project implementation and the compliance of that project. If Another situation I've seen several times is bids come in lower than expected. There's a very competitive market whenever this is bid out. The city would then have to come up with additional work or run the possibility of not using all of the grant funds. And so it all depends. Generally, you can do that, but it may complicate the actual implementation of the grant if
Okay,
it gets
well,
funded.
and we've done that with CDB grant funding in the past
Yes, sir.
because we got such a good bid. We were able to expand the area
Sure.
and continue the project for X number of feet longer. Okay,
And there is $275,000 budgeted this fiscal year for these grant matches.
okay.
So we'll have that money to go in addition to.
It would be my suggestion, and I don't know that we necessarily take it back to the council as a recommendation, but it would be my suggestion that we, as a committee, if we're agreeable to designate the downtown, historic downtown district as our Main Street area for the purposes of this grant application. Is that the direction that the staff is looking for tonight?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, is that agreeable with the committee? Okay, I'm getting an affirmative from everyone, so that gives you that information that you need, so y'all will be able to proceed now with the next step.
Yes, sir. I will make one more statement about it. This particular grant is only available to those cities designated as Main Street cities. And so while, even if we don't score as well on this application, the pool of candidates is much less. So we feel like we've got a better chance of receiving this grant.
And it would certainly be my suggestion that we offer the matching grant at the 15% to try to score and rate as highly as possible,
Yes, sir.
okay?
That will give us the most competitive application.
Go
Go ahead.
No, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I guess, so you're gonna bring back to us, Nick, first off, always go after the free money. So, always go after the free money. And you're gonna bring back to us some projects, whether we're gonna look at what we can get for that $402,000, I guess.
Yes, sir.
As far as sidewalks, lighting, how we can make the biggest impact.
Yes, sir.
Maybe that will fit in with what we're gonna propose with the bond and.
We can break that out by block and give you some options on what you
Okay.
might want to do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I got one more, Alan, just
Okay.
before we move on, because you mentioned, Mr. McAdams, you mentioned the ADA compliance and the sidewalks added to the score. Anything else that we need to be listening for that, if this is a new process?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the scoring details are directly connected to census data. And so a lot of it is just fixed. There are a couple of things. One, it is the 15% match. It is the predominantly sidewalks and ADA access, which I believe staff has been given direction to focus on that. The other thing is having the public hearing early, and so council did that a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Really, the only other thing is the city encouraging a fair housing activity during this process, the application. That's brand new to this program. One of the options is to encourage local business owners to post papers that, hey, fair housing is good. And so we actually have some posters from the state and from HUD that we will share with staff and with council. We were actually supposed to have a webinar with the state today. They got postponed where they were going to discuss that specific thing in some more detail. We're hoping to have that next week, I believe it's rescheduled for. That's brand new this year, but that is one additional area to gain some points. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no more questions, we'll go to the next grant application, which is the Community Development Program in the CDBG program. This is the standard CDBG that you hear about, where we go and usually take care of the inadequate, undersized water lines, provide better fire protection. That's what we did with our last couple of CDBGs. And the last one, I believe it was 2018, we focused on the Lenox, Dodge, Fairfax area and replaced some 2-inch water lines, added fire protection, upgraded those 2-inch to 6-inch lines. And that's what we're looking at again this year. This particular grant has a 20% match with a maximum award of $350,000. That would require a city match of $70,000. However, I did receive a little wrinkle in this application this afternoon. What we were not aware of until this afternoon is that the census data that we've used in the past, even though we're focusing on the exact same project area as we did in 2018, that census data is no longer acceptable to TDA. Meaning that in order to submit an application, we would need to go door to door and ask people how much money they make. Because this is a grant that is dependent upon low to moderate income parameters. When I told Mr. McAdams with Public Management, the city doesn't want to go door to door and ask people how much money they make. He said, neither do we, but we will. If we do that, we're probably going to extend our existing contract, but as you can imagine, it would be about $150 an hour, which you can imagine could add up very quickly. That is in addition to an application for this CDBG that we think will score on the low end, because we have been so successful with these in the past. Every time we receive these grants, we're not able to get as many points as if we hadn't got them in such a long time. I would leave it up to the pleasure of the committee, but staff's recommendation would be to not submit an application for this unless directed to do otherwise and perform those surveys.
Since this is a new requirement, do we anticipate it continuing to be this type verification rather than the census data that we've used traditionally?
I defer to you if you even know.
Yeah. So it's a great question. Like so many things right now, there's a lot of uncertainty that we're all working within. This is new guidance that was released by TDA in March of 2020. They apparently were in long discussions with HUD about this before they released it, and it was effective March 2020. I do not know how a new administration would impact this specific interpretation by either HUD or whenever Commissioner Miller's term expires, whatever happens there. The biggest thing I will say right now, I expect this guidance to remain similar. Whether or not Stephenville has to do a survey moving forward in these will depend upon the census results. And so the census data that we have to work with is extrapolations of extrapolations from the decennial census. They are supposed to release that information, I believe, later this year or next springtime. I'm not sure what their schedule is right now on this specific data set. If there is a possibility that Stephenville could come in high enough based on that new census data that, hey, the city of Stephenville citywide is considered 51% low to moderate income. That's kind of the magic number. Currently, census has Stephenville, I believe, at 49 or 50%. So right there close to it. The data could come back that Stephenville is more low income this year, or it could come back there's less low income this year. If the city is less than that, I think some kind of survey requirement will remain in effect for the city moving forward. But if we come back citywide, we're above that, then we could potentially look at projects in future years that have a citywide benefit. And so that could be main trunk lines, that could be main transmission lines, work at your plants, towers, wells, those types of projects. And so I do not know what the future holds about this specific issue. This is having very large and important effects throughout the entire state. And it may be throughout the entire country. These are just questions that are unfolding as we move forward. So, I'm sorry, I can't give you a more definitive answer.
Well, but you answered my question, because if our census data is gonna determine this once it comes back, and at that point, then we'll have to make the decision, do we feel like that we have sufficient cause to go door to door? At this point, I do not. I don't think it would be wise, and I don't think it would be a good expenditure of monies to do that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. What I will say, not to advocate one way or another, there are many cities in this state that have for years had to complete some kind of survey to participate in this program. And so I do want to make it clear that surveys are not new in general. The interpretation and the ruling and the way it is impacting Stephenville is new, okay? And so surveys have been around for a long time. A lot of places do surveys. It is a lift. No matter who you are, how large your population is, it is a lift. But many places, that's the only way to participate in this program.
I would like to say one thing, Mr. Huckabee, I'm with you. We need to go after the free money every time we can. The reason I suggested that we not submit an application for this one is that in order to do these, if we were to pay public management, our contract then becomes from a no risk to a risk.
I understand that 100%. Yeah, I would not be in favor of doing it either, because it sounds like even if we did it, our
There's no
chances of
guarantee.
success are not there. So I feel the same way.
I would go along with that as well, but if you were to do it, is there any livability of the data that's collected?
5 years.
5 years? Okay.
So, I've double and triple checked this. This has been a long-standing rule. It is still in effect as of today. Once you collect a survey form, that specific survey form is good for 5 years.
And then is that data, can that data be used to extrapolate beyond the area that you've collected, or is it specific to that?
Yes, sir. And so, let's say, hey, we do a large survey. 1 year, we want to apply for a smaller project in this whole survey area. We can pluck out those survey forms. Or say, hey, we did this survey last year, we want to extend an application next year, and so we're going to add to these surveys, but we cannot take those surveys and just do an extrapolation.
What are we talking in terms of numbers of the survey,
As far as cost or households?
households?
Looking at the aerial, it looks like maybe somewhere between 50 and 100, somewhere like
You
that.
gotta do everyone in the,
Yes, sir. And so the requirement for that is you have to have 100% effort. And so you have to contact every occupied residence, and then you have to have at least an 80% response rate. And so if there are 100 households, at least 80 would have to respond, and those 20 that didn't respond would have to be contacted at least twice to meet the 100% effort requirement. Every non-response you get is considered a high-income household, and the magic low, high income percentage is 51% of this area is low income. And so it gets very technical, and play around a lot with spreadsheets.
And we do have the funds, we have that 275,000 that's allocated for that. I would advocate that we spend that on the Main Street area, but certainly we have an opportunity here to do that.
I also would rather see that funding expended in an area where I think it would generate the most benefit, and I'm not sure this would. It's gonna be difficult to, and I should have asked this question already. This has to be an in-person survey. You can't do this online, right?
The state has not authorized, to my knowledge, an online COVID-approved methodology. They have only after COVID, after they released this new methodology, allowed for mail-out forms, I believe. But for years, this is the first year it's really changed. It had to be in-person, door-to-door surveys.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee? I think staff is seeking direction here whether to proceed with this or not. It's my opinion that our time and resources would be better used in other areas. I feel there's going to be a significant amount of reluctance from many residents on being willing to divulge the income of that household.
I agree with you.
I agree.
Okay, does that give you the direction you need, Mr. Williams, then?
Yes, sir.
For I think the majority of the committee feels the same way, and so even though I'm like Brandon, I hate not to try to take advantage of an opportunity for grant funds, but in this case, I think we'd be better served to use our time and efforts in other places.
Agreed, yes, sir.
Okay? Thank you for coming. I appreciate the info.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The last item on the Public Works Committee agenda is an overview of the Harbin Drive plans. Mr. Nix noted that we do have the 90% plans in place, and specifically what we want to do is just put the layout in front of you. We do have an exhibit, if we can pull that up. Mr. Mitch Ayton is here from Freese Nichols and can give us a brief overview of what Harbin looks like today, and then what the proposed Harbin looks like with regard to what the water and sewer will look like, and then specifically going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. The add alternate is concrete material. With regard to, oh, good. I'm famous. What water and sewer will look like.
Which part of Harbin is this?
Specifically going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. The add alternate. Okay, great. And I don't know if you're able to blow that up so that we can focus on specific areas.
Someone will come take control of it.
There is a 10-foot shared use path on the south side of Harbin that goes from Washington in front of the stadium all the way to the J.C. Park. There is a proposed 5-foot regular ADA sidewalk on the north side. That's also proposed for that same distance from Washington to the northwest loop.
Can I ask questions here, or should I just?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things I see here, across from the stadium area, where we've got future commercial development possible there, what about pedestrian traffic across that? And a walkway or a way to plan for that, that we can put in place where we're not going back and redoing something? Is that in here? And I'm clearly not an engineer, so.
Well, I think, would you like to give just an overview first, and then we'll come back and focus on that one part?
And
Is that okay?
that's fine.
Okay.
Like Nick was saying, we're converting from a 2-lane to a 4-lane road, going from Washington all the way up to the Northwest Loop. One great thing that we actually have an intern at Freese that lives down here and goes to the college, and we've been told by her and all the public, Fry Street's just horrible when everyone's going through there. We are adding some turn lanes there, So that's gonna be a big plus, and it fits inside the right of way. So that's an exciting part of this project. And then, like Nick was saying, water sewer drainage improvements. Currently not adding any new traffic signals. There are some crosswalks at Fry Street to cross the street, basically where people are crossing the day. And then they'll have crossing at Washington. If you wanna add a crossing, you can. The problems that come up with that is a 4-lane road, it gets unsafe. Most cities recommend the pedestrian hybrid, just for public safety on that part. So it'd be one more signal to maintain on it.
And Mitch, you're talking about like a mid-block crossing?
Yes, sir.
Right, so we have crossings at the intersection.
Right.
Okay.
Would we set up like a hawk signal, kind of like what's by Tarleton now on the north side?
Yeah, so we could put one of those in on this project.
Okay.
And where are you calling for that?
We're not calling for it right now, but if there's something we want to add to the project, we can.
I think that's addressing mine.
I think what happens is, so we did a, I don't want to say an extensive study, but we sat and we watched the pedestrian traffic coming from the Chamberlain parking lot to the Tarleton campus. And that's where we knew where to set that hawk signal on Fry. We just watched where the people traveled. And I think that if all of this residential property is going to develop as commercial property, we're gonna have to wait and see where the cattle trails are before we put those in. We don't wanna spend a bunch of money putting it in the wrong
As long as
spot.
that's able to be done
Yeah, from the beginning.
from,
Yeah.
eventually, and we don't have to spend a lot of money to go back and fix something and change something.
Yes,
You know-
sir.
You know what I'm not saying do it now, but be planning, because that's gonna have to happen.
Yes, sir, understood, and agreed.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Between Fry and the Northwest Loop, I get between Washington and Fry, but between Fry and the Northwest Loop, that's not really slated to be future commercial development. You have a lot of houses there.
Yes, sir.
What are we doing are we impacting folks' ability to get in and out of their homes?
The short answer is yes. And I know Ms. Leverton would like to speak also.
I
So
would.
what I spoke with her about today was this median here, and it's certainly the pleasure of the council, whatever you'd like to do. There's a balance between safety, you've got 4 lanes of traffic instead of 2 lanes of traffic now, and convenience. And so, do we trade convenience for safety? Do we trade safety for convenience? Certainly, if we think this area between Fry and Overhill is not going to be commercial in the next couple of years or even decades, then maybe it does make sense to just have a turn lane put in there. Again, the recommendation is shown on here as a median, just as a default to safety. But this would be the pleasure of the committee and the council.
When you say safety, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, just keeping cars from crossing over. That's really all that is. Crossing into head-on traffic. We do anticipate there to be more traffic once the road is nicer. Right? I hear, and this is anecdotal, I hear about people avoiding Harbin because it is so rough, and I think those cars that do avoid it now will not when it is complete, as well as we know Tarleton continues to expand. We don't expect the traffic to go down at all in that area.
Those turn lanes on Fry will help tremendously too, and so that may funnel more that would go that direction.
We've tried to look at all the different scenarios specifically for Lacey Funeral Home at the far, close to the Northwest Loop, and then First Presbyterian, to make sure that there are ways to get in and out when you have these congregations or a funeral procession. You know, it makes sense that they'll need to turn both directions on occasion, with a large number of traffic following them. We sat with the university and asked what their input would be on median breaks in front of the stadium. And they were very accommodating. They said, you know, once we get traffic into the campus, then we will reroute traffic however we see fit. But they were okay with the layout that we presented here.
It appears that there are multiple multiple entrances into their parking lot there? Am I looking at that correctly?
There-
Into Tarleton's parking lot?
There are multiple entrances.
That's
There's
the
only
current.
one that crosses all 4 lanes, and that is the main entrance of the stadium itself.
And the other two will be for the the east side only. Okay.
Right turns only, yes, sir.
Right. If I might, not being a traffic engineer, the purpose of a divided highway with a fixed divider, a median, in between, is to keep the lanes of traffic separated, the lanes of traffic that are bound in opposite directions. Is that a
Correct. Yes,
a
sir.
reasonable assumption?
Yes, sir.
We have a lot of traffic on Lingleville Road, for example, and it's 4-lane with a turn lane in the middle. And I see a significant amount of problems in that because people use that for a merging lane, they use that for a turn lane, and sometimes people drive in that because I'm gonna turn down there somewhere, and they get in that and they drive in it. And having the median in there eliminates that. I understand as we construct this, that safety needs to be a key concern for the residents, but as well as for the traffic, because there's gonna be a lot, I think, a significant increase in traffic as Tarleton grows, and as that side of town grows, traffic from the northwest loop to Washington and even to the south loop, because that's gonna be a north-south main thoroughfare there. I think, once we get that all implemented.
And certainly as that residential converts to commercial property, you tend to see a lot more individual trips.
If I could expand on a couple of your thoughts.
Please.
Justin Oswald, Freezing Nichols. You know, it's not just about traffic hitting itself head-on, but it's also all the turning movements out of those driveways. So as you can see on the exhibit, there's a whole lot of residential driveways. So as traffic picks up, if people are trying to make left turns out of those driveways, that'd be the only reason the median would be in their way, you know. They're turning past 2 lanes of traffic, and that can result in conflicting movements where people are turning out of 2 driveways at the same time, turning left past each other, and conflicts with the oncoming traffic, of course. So it's not just about the traffic going past itself on both sides of the road, but also all the turning movements that we'd expect. And of course, with development, you're gonna have more and more traffic coming out of those driveways, and that's another reason to consider the median. I also think, and Mitch, you can expand on all these points. Mitch he's been managing the design of this project, so he's the expert here. But I think this also gives a traffic calming benefit, and may, you know, from a traffic and a kind of aesthetic perspective, may be more beneficial to the neighborhood than something that looks more like a rural highway, like Lingleville. I think you might consider that to be more of a highway type of feel versus a city street.
Yeah, you'll have a tendency sometimes with these 4-lane roads and people coming out of the driveway, and they'll see cars coming and coming and coming. People get tired of waiting after 10, 15 seconds. They'll just pull right out and say, all right, I'm coming, everyone get out of my way. In my previous life at City of Fort Worth, we had actually come through, put in some medians, because our worst area in town with the wrecks. It's the same exact thing. People are tired of waiting for all that traffic. Y'all have constant traffic coming out of the school, so there's no breaks, and you'll have people after a while that's just gonna pull out in front of them. You'll have T-bone wrecks, so this will help keep that from happening. You'll get the initial phone calls after it's up of, I can only go right in and right out of my driveway now, I can't turn left like I used to. But it'll save in the long run on those T-bone type accidents. And
Yeah, if I could expand on that a little bit too. The way I think about safety is it's kind of a statistics thing. There will be wrecks on any road. You know, with all the traffic, eventually there will be a wreck. The safer you make the road, the less of those there will be. So it's not really of course, the road will work without the medians, but the medians provide a safety benefit, which will result in less wrecks over time. So it's kind of a, it's kind of a tough choice to consider, but safety does provide a benefit. You know, it's not a theoretical wreck that may happen. There will be wrecks over time.
Well, and if I understand both of you gentlemen, the convenience factor is what we're sacrificing by putting the median in, of being able to go left or right and enter the same way from either direction, versus the safety factor that you feel is that will have a significant impact on the safety factor, having the divided median in there.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, it's our recommendation. This is the best path forward, the best mix of convenience and safety. I don't think we would say that it's unreasonable to do it a different way. But weighing all options, we think this is the best.
Since this is your 90% design, this would be your recommendation for the safest for vehicular and pedestrian traffic, as well as the residents.
Correct.
Okay? Questions from the committee?
So have you guys included with this, or with this final presentation, projections on traffic volume, particularly in the north of Fry there, how that would be impacted? Because the commercial is all south of Fry, obviously. So do you have some data like that as a part of it?
Mitch, you can maybe expand on that, but this scope doesn't include a traffic study.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers on me, so we can provide them, but,
Concrete, that's it.
you'll see the increased traffic after that commercial development comes through, after Tarleton expands. The traffic you see out there today is, I mean, you go from 2 to 4 lanes, people are gonna drive Harbin more, and then you add in that commercial trips, and you add in more for the school, and that's growing. The traffic's gonna grow and grow. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but,
Well, we know where they've cleared out all the houses, that there's gonna be other stuff go there that's going to massively impact traffic, probably. Or could have a significant impact on
But I
traffic.
guess, I guess my point would be,
Where parking lot is currently going, yes, but yes, it will be.
is that traffic going to move, I mean, based on what you guys have done, is that traffic moving to the north? Is that the direction that everybody's gonna wind up going, or is it gonna be to the south?
I mean, it's gonna go both directions.
Well, Mitch, we haven't studied that. We don't have an actual study. Yeah. So we don't have a formal study. That's not part of this design effort.
And that's probably gonna be hard too, because it's gonna be a makeup of, that's kind of what Nick said, it's gonna be a makeup of what is that future development? Is it restaurants, or is it shopping, or is it, you know, what is time period and how many people actually are going there?
I will say it is part of our standard development process to require a traffic study. So from a development that generates significant traffic. So the need for additional traffic improvements, traffic flows would be evaluated as the traffic actually increases.
So once the development starts to occur.
Once it's proposed, then it gets looked at.
The traffic impact analysis is the standard for when developments go in.
And that's already part of what we do.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nix, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have data that shows the difference in likelihood, I guess, of accidents with, if you leave the, maybe not specific to this street, but if you leave the median, you're creating a lot of U-turns, I would assume. How does that compare to crossing the lanes straight out of a driveway?
Do you know of any study like that, Mitch?
I don't know one, but I can look one up. Sure, it's been done somewhere.
I can just,
Yeah, a lot of these.
I can imagine that will be a lot of circling and a lot of U-turns, and I just wonder what that difference will be compared to crossing 3 lanes, or
Right.
crossing 2 lanes into a 3rd lane.
And I guess the problem I see with that is if you're coming out and you want to go left, you're going to look at that line of traffic, and you're going to end up in the turn lane And then you're gonna start looking at the other traffic, and you're gonna be halfway out into this other lane. I've seen that happen on Lincolnville Road multiple times, and that creates a whole new set of problems, because
Oh, sure, yeah.
And that,
Lincolnville Road's a nightmare.
oh, it is.
I think that's what you're looking at if you don't do it.
Yeah.
I understand the convenience factor 100%, and I want to be sympathetic to that. But I think you're looking at a Lincolnville Road situation if you don't have that,
And I envision it having more traffic than the
where
Lincolnville
people
Road
are
does.
building circle drives to have a running start to go.
Have y'all looked at speed limits?
There'll be no left in those yards on the side to build the trail.
We're looking for 35 mile an hour
I mean, we're not
for the
gonna-
residential, and just keep that through the college as well.
So 35 from the, all the way down the road.
From Washington all the way to the loop,
Correct,
35,
correct.
okay?
What if that speed limit was reduced?
It's 40 now, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's
I think we would
reduction.
need to do a speed study before we just blanket decide, hey, we're gonna change the speed limit. So I wanna make that very clear.
I understand, I'm just trying to contrast the safety concerns that seem to be the predominant concern here, specifically in that residential area. What if that speed limit in that residential area was 25? How does that impact the concerns, the safety concerns that you guys are wrestling with here on this roadway?
I'd say that certainly improves safety. Every element of the design affects safety. We're, you know, there's all kinds of different decisions that get made throughout the design process. Each one can be done more conservatively, less conservatively. And so that would improve safety, but there's no way that I'm familiar with that we can quantify the change in,
That's gonna be difficult to enforce.
Right.
Many years ago, that road was actually 30. We changed it somewhere early 2000s is when we changed it to 40. When we did speed studies, back when it was 30, specifically north of Fry Street, the 85th percentile was regularly 47, 48 miles an hour in those days. It was not uncommon to cite people for 50 plus. When we raised the speed limit to 40, the 85th percentile dropped to 37 miles an hour. So you do have to strike a balance with what your speed limits are versus what the moving traffic is going to drive regardless of what the speed limit is.
You should put some 3 feet high.
Yeah, I was fixing to say, there's speed bumps. Always do that.
Bite your tongue.
No.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? We're not gonna, we don't need formal action on this tonight. This is an update, but I think staff is looking for some direction on how they would choose to move forward with this. Since we have the 90% plan, there can be some modifications. Comments or questions from other council members? I have one resident here that would like to speak,
Thank you, Mr. Nix.
and I'm gonna come to you in just a moment. Any other questions or comments? Okay, ma'am, I'm gonna give you the opportunity. This is a committee meeting. We're not gonna take any formal action. I'm gonna ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes, please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Nix.
Yes, ma'am.
Y'all may know me, I'm Kim Cleverton Wilson in my work world. There's some other residents that are actually here. We live along Harbin between Fry and Overhill. I live in Dr. Cedar's old house, for those of y'all who are familiar. I'm a big proponent of safety, and I'm a big proponent of planning for the future. I believe that the city of Stephenville should grow, and I believe we have to plan for that growth, absolutely. I would ask the council, however, to consider with particular regard to the medians from Fry Street to Overhill. That is a section of this plan that consists of mainly people who own or not own or live in the homes that they own. That's not as much rental. It's not a bunch of college kids. There are a few of those houses. There are. But most of us are there and plan to be there. I'm not selling the Cedars mid-century modern home anytime soon. And several of my neighbors I know I speak for. So I would ask the committee to consider, instead of putting medians there, to do turn lanes. And for several reasons. First of all, turning there is already sort of an issue because we have no buffer from people that are coming up behind us. I mean, that's already a problem. It is. When I turn left into my home, I can't do north, south, east, west, I'm sorry. When I turn left into my home coming down the road, I'm very careful to watch behind me and people are coming up behind me. But I will say this, that because of it's only a 2-block area, and because there is a stop sign at Fry Street, the traffic does not move very quickly in front of my home. It is naturally slowed by people who are coming to the stop or who are coming away from the stop. So the speed limit there really doesn't affect, and as so interestingly pointed out, when you set the speed limit at an appropriate limit, people don't speed. So from a speed perspective and from pulling out and pulling in, I don't really have any problems. Now, I haven't lived there for very long, so I don't know the traffic crash rate. I think that'd be interesting to have some statistics about before we decided that we needed to stop people from crashing and T-boning into each other. So I'm also very concerned that with the median and putting in this little turn lane before the cross streets, that what's going to happen is you're going to have traffic backing up back into the roadway because the turn cutout isn't going to be enough, and we're going to all be doing U-turns at 5 o'clock into our homes. The side streets around this area are not designed for the traffic that the main Harbin Drive at all, and I think we all agree about that. So you're either going to force me and all of my neighbors to drive on all the side streets that are not designed for the traffic, or you're going to have lots, I think, of backup as we do U-turns onto our street. And so I recognize the safety, and I recognize that generally speaking, and especially metropolitan areas like Fort Worth, that the amount of traffic could be a real concern with and needing those medians. I don't know if that's the case here. I don't know if it's the case that it'll be in the case in 10 years. My request would be that the city would consider putting medians that they could, putting turn lanes that they could later add and make medians if necessary. If you're putting in a turn lane in that space, then the traffic becomes onerous later for those 2 blocks. We could add the medians. That is an option potentially if it becomes a safety issue. So it really is for me about safety. It is convenient. It is convenient for me to drive down my street and be able to turn into my driveway like all the rest of you can, and I still can right now. But it isn't necessarily just about convenience. It's also about really what we're doing as far as a safety issue. It is going to create a lot more traffic and a lot more round U-turns on that road by putting in medians. So, and I would prefer to have a protected left turn. So when I turn into my house, I'm not worried about getting smashed behind me. I don't know that this fixes that problem, because I'm going to come down the street now, me and all of my neighbors that live on that west side, and do a U-turn, and because that's how we're going to have to access our home. So if we could do it as a turning lane and save the medians for later. Here's my other issue about the median is more of an expense than a striped turn lane would be there. I'll just say this, and I love my city of Stephenville, but we don't maintain things very well sometimes. And when I look out and see a median that looks like many of the medians in the city look like, the phone calls to the city are going to be frequent. Because I don't want to look at that. I really don't.
Thank you for coming
So,
tonight.
thank you very much. I appreciate y'all letting me talk, and I know that the committee doesn't have to hear from people, but I would appreciate that we consider the people that live along that area particularly in making this design.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Do you gentlemen have anything to add to what she has said?
I guess for me, it goes back to the whole purpose of, if we're creating a 4-lane road, are we just as a resident of Stephenville, I don't want Harbin Drive to be the Lincolnville Highway. Do we have to make it a 4-lane road?
It's
Because
our,
what it's doing, especially before we live down almost at Overhill, what it's doing before you get to that point, those people will be right on the road. It takes, the way that was all laid out, and everybody bought a house, thinking they had, you know, so much space between them and the road, only to realize now that the majority of their yard is going to get taken, and they're gonna be where they were, feeling like they were off of a fairly busy road. Now they're gonna be right on top of the traffic. And there will be no room in some of those places for any way but for you to back out into that street, especially on our side. And no place in your yard really to put any kind of a place to back into, to head out forward. That's my concern, is that we've spent a lot of money in houses that I just feel like this is all detrimental to.
and we, at the city level, I don't feel qualified to make that determination. And that's why we hired professional engineers to look at the current and future projections of traffic in that area. Not only our residents, but Tarleton traffic as well. I think that Freese and Nichols came up with the conclusion that it needed to be a 4-lane to accommodate the volume of traffic that's there now and is anticipated to go. Am I correct in that thought process?
So Mitch, and I've forgotten, we didn't do a traffic study specific to this project, correct?
Not specific.
Yeah. Freeze and Nichols did help prepare the master thoroughfare plan,
Yes.
which looks at traffic throughout the city. That's not, that's based on more of a typical spacing needs for traffic to move from local streets to more significant arterial thoroughfares, you know, collectors arterials and so forth. So yes, from a citywide perspective, there is a need for an arterial road in this area that can move traffic. There will continue to be growth as the city expands. You know, the master thoroughfare plan is not looking at just today, but looking at as the city grows from here on out. So the need is there, but the design that we're moving forward today is, or what I'm trying to say is the master thoroughfare plan looks at the big picture. What we're looking at now is just how to implement. And this is the recommended path to implement this type of road that is needed somewhere in the city, and of course Harbin is the spot.
And I don't know that answers your question, and if I had one of those houses, I'd feel the same way that you do,
Yeah.
I suspect.
If I lived on the opposite side of the street, I wouldn't feel as bad.
It wouldn't be as quite a big an issue.
Because the way that road goes through there, most of the land is gonna be taken for our side. And so, you know, I'm not good at judging, but I'm losing half of what's a front yard now, more than half, probably. And so that's a significant change. When you buy a place and you look at it that the house has been there 60 years and nothing about that road has changed, and I buy this house and 5 years later, we're about to turn up the world, and that's worrisome when you spend as much money on a house as we both have.
I understand.
Mr. Nichols, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I guess this would be a question for staff. How long has the city had that right-of-way at the width it is now?
It is the existing right-of-way. When it was acquired, I do not know. It's decades.
Years? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that would always be indicated on a survey, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we knew that. I mean, you know it's there, but when somebody hadn't done something in 60 years, there's a little bit of a precedent in your mind that takes over.
Well, and you think, will they ever?
Will they ever,
Yeah.
is exactly
But,
right.
but now's the time that we're, I feel like we're compelled to do it, but because of traffic and because of growth and because of the very reasons that we're trying to encourage growth in that section of town, and facilitate the movement of traffic through
Mr. Nix, can I ask just a question, because I can't, it's impossible for me to tell. Is the plan taking up the full amount of the right-of-way, so that the edge of the sidewalk on both sides is the edge of the right-of-way? I'm just trying to get a picture in my head what that's gonna look like.
It's gonna be pretty close. It'll be 2 to 3 feet off.
Okay,
I think it's using the majority of it, if my memory is
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
I assumed so, I just
Yeah, the sidewalk
thought I
will
would
be
ask.
2 to 3 feet away from the right of way.
Okay.
I'll say that later.
That's it, we're just looking for a little direction on that particular piece of this layout.
And I don't know if the other committee members have an opinion on that. Convenience is always important, and I understand that fully, but safety, when we design any traffic facility in the city, safety should be at the forefront of the considerations that we make. Now, the other committee members may have different opinions or different things to offer. I'll certainly throw that open.
Well, I've heard, in my time on the council, I've heard more about Harbin Drive than pretty much any other single item. And I would hate to go through the process of rebuilding Harbin Drive only to have everybody that lives on Harbin Drive still calling and complaining about what we did on Harbin Drive. That would be my concern. I think, ma'am, you brought up a great point. Maybe for the foreseeable future, we simply have turning lanes in between Fry and Overhill, where the residential section of that street is. And with the ability maybe to add the medians if it's warranted on down the road. I think that's a pretty good solution to the problem. If I lived on that street, I'd be raising Cain to have medians that I'm gonna have to make a U-turn every time I go into my house.
And staff will take that under consideration with all the comments tonight, and I think what we do is we come back to you with that. I mean, we're at the 90% stage now, and I think we'll take those comments under advisement and then bring you back a solution.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I would like to thank Mr. Williams. He's been fantastic through this whole process, so kudos to the city staff, and I really do appreciate his communication every time that I've asked. So thank you very much.
And I will brag on our
Thanks, y'all.
staff, and all of our city employees for that matter, because they try to do as instructed and accommodate residents and their requests and information, et cetera. I think all of our city employees and staff do an exemplary job of that. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think that concludes my presentation for tonight. Gentlemen, thank y'all for coming, and thank you for the work that you've done. Look forward to seeing the 100% product when y'all get it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nix. That brings us to the final item on the agenda tonight, and that's Development Services Committee. So, Mr. Huckabee.
All right, sidewalks, more sidewalks. This has been an ongoing back and forth to try to get some better clarification and better policy in place for ordinances. Section 155, known as the subdivision ordinance, provides design standards. And we've been, thank y'all, we've been requested to review how that waiver process is done. Steve and I have met a couple times. He's worked really hard on that, so I appreciate that. We brought a couple of options that we wanted to present to the committee. Get your thoughts so that we could bring something back in the very near future, kind of get something finalized to go on. Option A is maintain the existing waiver process with the following revisions. Waiver requests will not be considered for new developments or newly platted and replatted properties after established future date, which we can define as when it's put in place. Waiver requests will not be considered for properties that lie within areas previously accepted as part of the sidewalk improvement program by resolution that was taken in February of 2019. And this is an option that was put in there. Require a sidewalk dedication payment equal to 15% of the total improvement cost of the requested waiver based on a calculation derived from the most current bid tabulation sheet. Persons granted waivers for property that do not fall within items 1 or 2. Those funds would then go to help the city continue to develop sidewalks, curbs, and gutters throughout that designated area. As part of the plan where I've always pushed, if we're not going to be investing in sidewalks, curbs, and gutters, why are we telling people that they have to if we're not bringing our share to it? Or there's option B, where we could incorporate a staff review component in an effort to reduce the waiver cases that come to council. Create a minor waiver application for staff review, establish a decision workflow for staff use, an appeal process to council, and then again that 15% is in there. We can do, as you see options here, we can do anything. We can require them, we can get rid of them totally. So those are the two options that Steve and I came up with. I personally like option A. I am up for conversation on number 3 on option A. I understand the reasoning for it, but I wanted to bring this to the members of the committee and get your thoughts on it. So at this time, I will open it up for comments from Mr. McClinton or Mr. Thurman, and then we'll get everybody involved.
Brandon,
Yes, sir.
with regard to number 3,
Yes.
where did the 15% come from?
It was a number we just basically, we looked at a couple of different programs. There was another program that we looked at, and really it was just a number that we thought based on the average price that somebody would pay that would fit in but allow us to continue to fund that sidewalk match program, curb and gutter program. And where everybody's, it's not necessarily as much of a financial decision to come and ask for that waiver because you're going to be contributing to the betterment of the city. Anyway, does that make sense? So that, I mean, to me, that can be worked however we want to work it. It can be gone away with.
Or it can be raised.
Or it could be raised.
On the question for staff on the park, new development, we require park dedication.
Yes.
We also allow people to pay instead of doing the park land dedication. Is that based on a percentage?
That's a flat fee
Or is
based
it
on the
just a
number
fee?
of units, yes, sir. So the number of residences on a single-family development or the number of units on a multifamily development.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Which we could come up with some tabulation like that as well.
Yeah.
Make sure I understand number 3 right. That's 15% of what the cost of putting the sidewalk in for that development, for that.
And we would basically
lot.
have a per foot price, and if it's 100 foot and it's a $10,000, or it's whatever, it would be, for each math, it would be $1,500 that they would pay into that sidewalk.
So everyone would still have to come, if they're not 1 or 2, they're still gonna have to come for a waiver. If they grant the waiver, they've got to agree to pay the 15%.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
It just seems like that's not enough, for some reason.
And that's open for,
I mean, why would anybody want to build a sidewalk if they can pay 15% and not do it?
no, that's, well,
That's only if they're granted a waiver.
correct. Right now, they pay $250 and take their chance. Now, if they were to do it, it would be, it would be significantly more than that, probably.
So you're saying that's their waiver, that's their fee to file for a waiver? Is that what you're saying?
When the waiver is granted.
That's
Granted.
Correct.
It's
if the
exactly
waiver was
fee.
approved.
Okay.
They have to be willing to do that. If they're asking for the
Yeah.
waiver, they're willing to do that,
Yeah.
which they'll know what that fee is.
And that's $250 for the sidewalk waiver and $250 for curb and gutter if they get them both?
Yes, sir.
That's what it
Every-
is currently.
Every improvement is considered a different application.
Because
Code needs
I
application,
remember,
But
right when I came on, I believe that was asked and was raised as part of our fee structure. We raised those because it was nothing.
$3.
Yeah, yeah. It was insignificant, so that's, everybody applied for it. So, and it's not, I don't think it's not to be burdensome on the citizens, but it's to, they're asking for a waiver in one of those areas and, you know, and they're not required in some of the areas where we've had our biggest debates up here on it. And so you're really staying within the program that we've, by resolution, adopted to have sidewalks. Committee?
Well, Brandon, this is much closer, I think, the language is much closer to what we're actually doing, what we have been doing, since the subdivision ordinance was passed. So I think this is many steps in the right direction. I agree with Gerald, I think the 15% is probably too low,
Okay,
a number. I think we should look at that maybe a little bit harder.
okay.
And then, I guess my question, Steve, one of the options is to do a combination of the two. So if somebody comes in and says they want to get the waiver and they qualify to apply for a waiver, and if we could do this staff review for a waiver so that we could actually allow the staff to say, well, you know what, if you're willing to pay the 25% cost of fee, okay. To me, maybe that's a way that we could, I mean, they still don't have to go to P&Z or to the council to get the waiver actually done if we allow the staff to say, okay, it's 25% or 30% is what you'd have to pay as a fee. We can grant it to you right now if you're willing to pay that. So it seems to me that might be a way to streamline a little bit too.
Mr. McClendon, if I
I agree
may,
with that.
we could certainly.
only in
craft it
certain
that
areas,
way.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he's got it lined out that there's only, waivers will not be
Yeah,
administered in
in 1 and
certain areas.
2, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
No worries. Just for a point of clarification on what was presented in this particular packet, and we can craft it any way the council desires, but the minor waiver process would be dealt with at staff level, and it would be completely over at the staff level with an appeal process that could come straight back to city council to override that decision process. The fee would also be as part of the staff, but they would, once it was reviewed by staff, it would not go to P&Z and it would not go to council. So it would alleviate some of the concerns or some of the waiver requests coming to council based on the way it's drafted currently.
But that's option B.
Change that, 'cause
Yeah,
that's what
but
we're saying.
we can certainly
But they
change
can-
it to still require it to go to
Right.
to P&Z and council if that's the desire.
And no, that's not what I'm asking
No.
for at all. You've got option A, if I read this correctly, if the waiver request was honored, it would then go to P&Z and on to council, just the way it's done right now, if somebody wanted to pursue the waiver. Is that correct? In the
Under option A.
Currently, any waiver requests,
No,
No.
right here, Steve, in option A of this document, it would still go to P&Z and council, right?
my glasses here. Yes, sir.
Yes.
The option B is the minor request.
So what I'm suggesting is maybe what we do is we kind of combine those, like one of the options down here is, and allow that to be a staff level, a staff decision with the appeal. And again, if somebody wants to go forward with the waiver and they're willing to pay the fee, whatever that fee is, then you guys can just say, okay, if you're willing to pay the fee, we'll grant it today and it's done. So
In other words,
allow it all to be a
go ahead.
staff level decision. If they appeal,
It goes to.
It
it would go to
to-
it would go on.
goes on.
So it'd be a,
So it's really not even, wouldn't even be a staff, it would just be a policy. If you don't want to do
It'd be
it,
a
you just
policy.
have to pay the fee.
it's not, it wouldn't even be a decision, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just a
it's just a no-brainer.
policy.
If
You
you're
either
willing to
do it,
pay.
Or you pay the 25%.
Exactly.
Yeah, provided you fall outside of the
Right.
first
But
two.
we've shrunk the area.
But that's
We've
exactly right.
focused the area that they're being required. So
Exactly.
we're not making everybody pay.
Exactly.
We're focusing this area, and as a council, we're gonna say, we're gonna focus on this area too, and that's what this money is gonna go to,
I agree. Yeah.
is my thought process.
So would it, and this may muddy it too much, and I guess it's
We're
something
good at
staff
that.
could lead, it's something staff, I guess, could lead the conversation on, but, was there any, have you had any talks about including any of this in the cost share program? So the purpose of the fee is to build up that cost share program.
As my understanding, everybody that comes in through that knows about the cost share program and is available to apply for it.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, everybody is available to do that.
okay. So really, a 25% fee is, it's gonna save them half of what it would cost them if they just participated, I'm sure. Okay.
So if we go back and recommend, and I agree with Mark down here on this, if we can recommend option A, but with the addition of part of B, i.e. giving staff the option of doing those reviews that can be included, they're not in 1 and 2. And so it can be an automatic thing, subject to an appeal if they didn't like the result. That, I'd be all for that, with the requirement that on, that part of number 3 is that we increase that number from 15% to 25 or 30% or something like that.
Can we look at, and we can bring a couple of percentages back to the council meeting? Let's look at like the average lot line, the average cost, and find out what that
Yeah,
is, so we
see
can
what the numbers are.
have a good idea of what that number is, because if 25%, I know it's not, but if it was 5,000, that's a lot different than if it was 1,000.
Exactly.
And so let's do that if we can, if that is all right with you as a committee.
Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Nix, or did you have any? Mr. Nix?
I understand what you're doing. I think it's a move in the right direction because we have certain areas that we've designated that we want to encourage sidewalks. Other areas of town, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to ever have complete continuous sidewalks.
Right.
But wherever those areas are, if they are going to seek a waiver, I would say 50%, because that's what they're going to be required to pay. So this makes it not just a monetary decision. If we're in a cost share with them, the city pays 50%, right? And so if they're gonna pay the same amount of money, but they're gonna maintain their front yard, they're gonna continue to have access to it and use of it just like they do now. And that gives us more money to go somewhere else and construct sidewalks in the areas that we've designated. The only problem I see is if you put it at a staff level decision, that puts another burden on staff. And I agree that it's a burden on P&Z and on council, but now you're adding work to staff. If staff's comfortable with that, then I think that's a good idea. I think it's a move in the right direction. The percentages, I guess, are the question, and as long as they maintain that items 1 and 2 under option A are going to be maintained, if they don't qualify for those, then the third option, the waiver, is not an option to them. That's, if I'm interpreting this correct. Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, I got a message and I looked at it.
Okay.
I missed the first part.
If they don't comply
I'll be
with
honest.
1 and
My
2
wife texts me. I'm
under
sorry.
option A, they're not gonna receive a waiver unless they go to P&Z and or council to get it. Is that correct?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so that eliminates a lot of the problems that we have already, and especially in the newer areas that we want to encourage the sidewalks and
Yeah.
if I read this right, that's for sidewalk and curb and gutter both. And they could ask for the sidewalk but not curb and gutter, or vice versa, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I think that's a positive move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good.
You good? Good? You feel good?
I believe so, yes.
Any
thank you.
questions
Appreciate
you
the-
need to ask I think I pretty much know where everybody stands, and I'll get with Steve, and we'll have this ready to bring back. We'll see. Hopefully we have this ready to bring back for the February meeting, so.
All right, thank you.
And with that, that adjourns our session meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Huckabee. That concludes the agenda items we have for tonight, so at 7:16, I'll call us adjourned.